video in the new year. This one's entitled Pamela in honor of Friday the 13th. I know I'm a little late, but um, let's begin. Jason built Camp Crystal Lake with Lincoln logs he had gotten for his birthday. In the distance, he heard his mother calling him to dinner. He debated leaving his masterpiece behind, but he knew Mother would be upset if he didn't respond right away. So he ran to the sound of her voice and gave her a big hug. Pamela jerked awake from the dream of her son, hoping she would find it was real, and him being missing was just a bad dream. Her eyes searched the room, but it was empty, and no noise of play reached her ears. She had fallen asleep in a rocking chair, clutching his baby blanket from pure worry and exhaustion. Daylight hadn't yet peeked over the horizon, but the guilt called for her to search for him. The police had promised they would search through the night. They had practically begged her to try and get some rest. But all she had been doing was pacing the floor with worry for her precious son, who was out in the woods alone and afraid. She didn't bother to turn on the flashlight as she exited her cabin, as she walked the trail to the lake, because she had been walking these trails for decades. Pamela could maneuver through the woods better blindfolded than most could on a bright sunny day. The flashlight searched the woods in the distance for the missing kid, and she drew closer. As she drew closer, she could hear police chief talking about with her boss, Mr. Christie. The little freak drowned. The sheriff blew out a cloud of smoke. You can see his tracks go to the docks and don't come back. Why are we wasting community resources when we already have the answer? I know the boy wasn't exactly handsome, Mr. Christie started. That's a fucking understatement. But his mother loved him, and we owe it to her to do everything we can to find him. He may just be lost, or he could be, or you could be trying to avoid being found guilty for his death. Some of your counselors were supposed to be watching him, weren't they? But they were too busy humping like rabbits to be bothered by Mama Voorhees' precious little monster. Pamela tried to shut out the horrible words that she was hearing, to silence the truth that she might never see her precious, special boy again. Why hadn't the counselors been watching him like they were supposed to? She had been working, doing her job, while her boy slipped under the water of the lake. If they were so interested in screwing instead of doing their jobs, they should have sent Jason to the kitchen so she could watch him. Are you saying my boy is dead? Pamela stepped into the clearing and mumbled a question. It was hard to fight back the tears. She had always considered herself tough and herself a strong woman, not prone to emotional outbursts, but this was too much for her. The loss of the one thing she loved most in the world, and the one thing in the world she could never hope to replace, her son. The men stared aghast at the discovery of Mrs. Voorhees having heard their conversation. They stared at the sorrow-filled woman, at a loss for words. It was no easy task to explain to someone their child was likely dead, and certainly the ham-fisted sheriff wasn't the man to do it. Mr. Christie would try his best to talk to his longtime employee and friend. I'm afraid the police found some tracks from your son's shoes, but they didn't come back from the docks, Mr. Christie explained. I know your son didn't swim very well, but he was still fascinated with the water. The owner of the Camp Crystal Lake let the realization sink in with the boy's mom. It would be easy if she could come to the conclusion on her own. He would spell it out to her if he had to, but he felt it would be better if she was the one to call off the church, so she wouldn't blame the authorities or cling to the false hope that Jason was still alive somewhere in the woods. We'll look for the boy, but we don't expect to find a body, the sheriff chimed in. Even if we do, I don't expect him to be alive. Pamela dropped to her knees and sobbed, trying to think of what she could have done to save her precious one. The men shifted uncomfortably as they wondered if there was anything they could do to make her feel better. It was going to be a long, hard night for everyone, and there was nothing they could do to make anything better for her. It had been a month since Pamela got out of the hospital, and she was wondering if she had made the right choice in coming back to Camp Crystal Lake. They had never found her son. The sheriff and Mr. Christie were right. Jason was never found. There was no body to find after several weeks of searching. The psychiatrist had tried to convince her that getting a gravestone would help her to move on. She couldn't do it. At least not yet. She needed to find out if a rumor was true. She paused for several minutes before turning down the familiar path to the camp that had once given her so much joy. But she only felt sorrow and hate now. This place was filled with the loss of her child. She needed to talk to Mr. Christie. He liked to stick around to close down for the season while his wife went on vacation somewhere far warmer. Mrs. Voorhees was glad she could talk to just one of them so they wouldn't team up against her. Felt